Welcome everyone to AfterCLIMB. So in the last session of AfterCLIMB, I talked about what I consider to be the most important report in our POS system, the return on investment report. Um, and I talked at that point and said, even if you're not inventory control, you can get value out of the return on investment report. However, to get full value, you have to be on inventory control. So today in AfterCLIMB, I'm going to talk about inventory control. So let's get started. First, I want to do a quick review of a couple of the terms I talked about last time. So inventory turns, important calculation, turns equal the cost of goods sold divided by the average inventory cost. So that's the measure of time, a number of times you sell through your inventory during whatever period you're looking at, and we usually look at that over the course of a year. So an example, if your sales are $500,000 in your front-end merchandise and your cost of sales are $300,000, then your average your average inventory is $150,000, then your turns are the $300,000, the cost of your inventory, divided by the average inventory value, and that means you have 2 turns in this example. So important to understand that. The other piece, gross profit return on investment, GPROI, is the GPROI is the gross profit over the period of time divided by the average inventory cost during that same period of time. It measures the amount returned on every dollar invested in inventory. And as an example, if your GPROI is 300%, it means that for every dollar you invested in inventory, your return is $3. So, and remember from last time, a good turn at the retail level is 4 to 6 turns. Good GPROI is somewhere in the 250 to 350% range. So now let's move on to a couple of other topics for today. So inventory control types. In our system, we have a couple. And I want to, before I get to those, I want to talk a little bit about this average inventory cost that's used in GPROI and turns. One of the things that our system does is on every single day, at the end of the day, our system records the inventory value of every single item in a table. So at the end of a period, let's say a year, you're looking at the gross profit return on investment, or the turns, and it's calculating that inventory, that average inventory cost for the entire year. It's summing for that whole 365 days. Every single day, there's that inventory value for every single item. It sums for each item, it sums up the inventory value every single day and divides it by 365 to get you what your true average inventory cost was over that entire year for that item. And it does it for every item. And that's how we calculate all the way down to the individual item level what that average inventory cost is. Now that's important because the 2 types of inventory control, basic and advanced, give us more control, granular control over ensuring that those daily inventory values are accurate. So basic uses average costing to calculate the current value. That's one of its differences. And it allows inventories to go negative, the on-hand quantities at the item level to go negative. So at the end of the day, if that item has gone negative, the recorded value for that item is whatever that negative amount is. So if the item is selling, or the cost of the item is $3 and you got your -1, then it's going to show the inventory value for that day was -3. Now, if you're keeping up on your inventory and you're fixing those negatives on a regular basis, you're not allowing lots of negatives to happen, then over a course of 365 days, it may not have a huge impact, but it's not as granular, not as controlled as advanced inventory control. So advanced inventory control uses FIFO, first in, first out, to calculate the current value. That's one of its differences. It does not allow for negative on-hand quantities. When an item is going to go negative, it throws that into something called the holding tank, and I'm going to be showing you that. So thinking, just keep in mind that the reason between the two, or the one of them takes more, is a little bit more involved, but it gives you advanced, but it gives you tremendous accuracy, far the greatest accuracy you can have. Basic, there are tools available for both of these, and it's not quite as accurate. But for some people, it's plenty. So it's really up to you as you understand these concepts as to choose what's best for you. And you can do mix and match. So in part of your store, some of the sections or some of the items could be basic and others advanced. And as you understand how this works, you'll be able to make a determination as to how much sense that makes for you. Okay, so I'm gonna get started in a little bit here with how it's set up. But the inventory control setup is the same really for both advanced and basic. It starts in the fine line code. I'll show you that, and then it's set at the individual item level under the product manager, under the sales tab. You choose whether it's basic or advanced, and I'm going to show you how to set that up very briefly. And then I'm going to talk about the tools. For both basic and advanced, we have a data anomaly feature in product manager, which some of you are aware of, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. And then we have an Android application for counting, doing inventory counting. Today, I am not going to talk about inventory counting. I'm going to do that next time. I'm going to go through actually doing a count using the Android app and show you how count sets work and how perpetual inventory counting works and so forth. So that's going to be next time. For basic, today we're going to talk about two reports that are imperative that you run regularly: the low stock report to show you anything that's gone negative, and the data anomaly report to show you anything that's being sold at cost or below cost. For advanced, you don't have to use those reports because those items, anytime an item is sold at below cost or at cost, or anytime that an item is going to go negative, it goes to the holding tank so that you can fix the item before it hits your reports. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to move over to the system here, the POS system, and I'm also going to turn off my video so that I maximize the screens that you can see. So I'm going to turn my video off. And we're going to start in the product manager. So I'm going to open the product manager. And the first thing I'm going to do is show you where you set these things, set this up. So I'm going to start just with an item here. And I'm going to show you a couple of things that tell you right off the bat, or one thing that tells you right off the bat whether or not you're you're on basic or advanced. And the first thing right here, you can see that the details button is not, it's grayed out. That details button is only available if the item is set up on advanced inventory control. Okay, now you can also see this particular item is negative, which also would be an indication that it's on basic inventory control. Now, I mentioned in the slide that there's where you get this started. The first place you have to have set up is under the fine line. So if you look under the fine line, there's a field here for inventory control status, and your choices are advanced, basic, or none. So there may be items in your store that you would do none. As a good example of that would be greeting cards. It doesn't make sense to try to do inventory control of greeting cards. So those items in the greeting card section would be set to none. As I mentioned, you may choose to do certain sections of your store as basic and others as advanced. That's completely up to you. And as you get used to this, and you can change that as time goes on. You can start basic, and then as you get more refined, continue to change certain areas to advanced. This is done at the fine line level. I'm going to leave this as basic because I'm going to be showing you the difference between the two. So that's the first place that things have to be set up, at the fine line. As you add new items into a fine line, it will look at what the inventory control status is, and it will then put that item in with that inventory control status. So if you put in a new item under acetaminophen, then it would be set up as basic inventory control automatically. Okay, now let's go and look at where in the item level. So now we're in this item under sales parameters. Then you can see there's a field here, inventory control status, and that has to be set as well. So if you set this to, you could set this to none, and that would allow you to not have this item on inventory control if there was some reason you wanted to do that. If you set it to advanced, it would not work. They have to match. It has to be um, it would have to be basic, or if you want it to be advanced, you'd have to have the fine line to be advanced. So this is already set to basic. Now, if you made a change, let's say that we went in the fine line, we set it all to advanced, and then we wanted to make all of the items in that fine line be advanced, we would use the tool in the Product Manager called block editing. And I'm going to show it simply because it's a neat tool. And we would come into block editor and we would find the field that all the fields in virtually all the fields in the Product Manager here. I've already pre-selected the inventory control status. So you would double click it. I'll just show, I'll double click, it's no longer yes, double click it again, it says yes. So now that's the field you want to change. And then you want to load your items. And so you're going to query your database. And I'm going to say I want to just change that one fine line. So I'm coming here and say I want to select the fine lines, but here's all the different criteria you could use to query the database. I'm doing it by fine line. I click next. It was this one fine line that I wanted to change, so I click next. It'll load all the items from that fine line. I can review them, click select all, click next. And then it'll bring all those items into the grid on the right. It'll tell you 37 items. I click OK. And then on the Product Manager, it tells me I'm in block edit mode, and it put in green, it highlights the field that I want to change. So I would simply click this, change it to advanced, which I'm not going to do, but I would change it to advanced, and then I would click next. And when that happens, it would go through all 37 of those items and change them to advanced. And that would be the only thing you have to do. And then you'd be done. You'd click block and it'd be done. Okay, that's the block editor, just an added bonus of how to make changes in the system. Okay, so that's getting everything set up. So now let's take a little bit deeper dive, and we're going to start with basic inventory control. So the item that I have here is on basic inventory control. And I'm going to look at two reports that that are important so that you can see, correct things as soon as you can so that it doesn't impact reports moving forward. Remember, with basic inventory control, every single day it's looking at the average cost. So in this particular case, with this item, there's a one on hand, but there's no cost associated with it. So it's going to show that the inventory is zero. There's one on hand, but it has no value. So that will skew your reports if that stays that way for a long period of time. So we have two reports to help us find problem children when you're using basic inventory control. So let's take a look at those two reports. So we're going to go over to product reports, and I'm going to hit product report. And the first one that I think is important is the data anomaly report. Now, this report can be used for lots of other reasons, but today we're going to look at it. Here are all the data anomalies. I'm going to come to here and I'm going to look at really what I'm interested in today is anything that has would skew the margin, the growth, there's no cost associated with it. There's zero retail, so it's selling at 100%, at 100% margin, or the retail is lower than the cost, so it's selling below cost. I'm going to go ahead and deselect all these and just pick these three. You can look through these. These are things that you might look at a different time, but for the purposes of today, I'm interested in these three things. So we're going to click next. And I'm interested in my cost. I'm really interested in this average cost, okay, because that's what the system is tracking. And I'm going to, just for sake of making this a little faster, since I just use a small portion, just 2 departments worth of items that I sell. So just to help speed along reporting for the purposes of this, I'm going to click and just choose the 2 departments that I sell from in my demo system. And we're going to preview this. Okay, and what we found here is this list of all of these items, and you can see the way this works, lists you the items, it gives you a problem column, and then up here it tells you what the problems are. So C stands for zero average cost, and you can see also there's zero average cost. So you would print this report, you would go to these items, and you would update them and get a cost associated with the quantity on hand. So you can see that there's a quantity on each one of these on hand, and then there's no cost associated with it. So if you're, as the system is recording that average or that value on a daily basis, it's recording a quantity in hand, but $0, and so that's going to skew your reports. So this, I should blow this up, sorry. This report is important to do that. So print this report, go into those items and correct the item. So let's take a look at one of those items before I move on. So I'll go ahead and close the report out, but let's go back to the product manager for a moment, and I will bring up this item. Okay, here's the item I was talking about, zero. The average cost is zero. And since you see that's in blue, this is a good time for me to talk about that something I mentioned called the data anomaly. So normally when you open Product Manager, you'd see the blue flip charts at the bottom. You notice the arrow, which means you can have 11 or F12 to go to the next screen. And there's a screen here called data anomaly. So when you click that, it lets you choose what is going to cause something to show up on the screen. So in this case, I've got all of these different things, the 3 that I ran the report for, and then some others. If it's got no vendor attached, if it doesn't have a preferred vendor, if it has multiple preferred vendors, things like that, that can be important in keeping my database clean. Now, if you're using target margins, you also could put target margins here, and you could put in a variance. So you'd say if it's under my target margin, but it's within 5%, then don't tell me about it. Okay, but anyway, back to what we're most concerned about today, which is these 3. So once you've set this up, what the system does is it highlights any fields that have a problem. And up here, it tells you what the problem is. So in this case, what C stands for zero cost. Okay, so now all we do in this case is we come in and tell it what the cost is. So if in this case, let's see, we could go back and you could look up the invoice and see, what the last time it was. But this cost over here, the regular cost, is what you're currently purchasing this item for. So for sake of discussion, it's just as easy. We're going to put that in here. The system is then, when we click save, the system is going to ask for a reason. You can set up reason codes. I just have inventory update. That's what I'm going to use. Okay, so now that the highlighting goes away, and now you fix this. So moving forward, like tonight, when this average value of inventory is tracked, it's going to have an accurate number. Okay, so that's the first report. The second report we want to look at is the low stock report. So let's go back over to reports, product reports, and run the low stock report. Now with the low stock report, we can tell it that we want to know on hands that are equal to or lower than. We'll go lower than equal to or lower than -1. I'm going to tell it to skip inactive items because that'll help speed the report. And then also, I'm just going to pick the departments again that I sell from, so it doesn't look at other items. And so I'm going to pick these 2 departments. Okay, and I only have one item that's on basic inventory control. That is below the, whoops, make that a little bit smaller. There you go. So I have this Tylenol. So I would need to go in to this Tylenol and fix the on hand. So how frequently should you be running these 2 reports? Well, it would be nice to run them daily and fix this stuff daily. Realistically, once a week. I think you will have to see how many items are consistently showing up on the report. If you just have if you're waiting a week and you have hundreds of items, then you have a serious problem with your inventory count, and then you need to evaluate redoing your count. But if you only have over the course of a week a handful of items, then you really probably aren't causing too much problem with your reporting. So it's really going to depend on how much of a problem you see in your pharmacy when you're running these reports. Okay, so those are the two tools that will help you keep your costs correct and your inventory correct. Now, if you move on to advanced inventory control, so let's go back to the product manager for a moment. I'm going to bring up an item that is on advanced inventory control. And you'll see with this item that when we look down here, it tells you this item is in the holding tank. So the holding tank in advanced inventory control is where items go when they've been sold at the till, and there's a problem either with the quantity or the cost. So let's go look at the holding tank. The holding tank's under inventory control. We click on the holding tank, and we'll see that we have two items in the holding tank. So at the upper portion of the screen are the items that are in the holding tank. And then when you look all the way across, it tells you what the problem is. So this first item, the Maalox Wildberry, is in there for insufficient stock. And there's two instances of this item. Okay, what does that mean? Well, down here are the instances, and this is the actual transaction that occurred at the till. So at this time and this time, these two transaction numbers, this was the quantity that was sold and the amount it was sold for. So two people came in and bought in different transactions, but there wasn't sufficient stock in the system during that time period. Okay, so when we look at this, we can see the we need to fix this inventory. The second one down is a zero cost sale. So what this allows us to do is fix these items in the product manager before the sale actually gets booked into the it books in the back end. I mean, you see it when you're running your daily reports, but it doesn't hit the product reports until it's corrected here. So even if you do it a couple days later, it's fixed in the system so that when you run your product reports, they're very accurate. Okay, so how do we do this? So the very first thing we can do is go, okay, here we have a total of this item with two items that it's trying to sell that doesn't have sufficient stock for. So we can click right down here to the product manager. By the way, before I go to that, if you had, let's say you had 20 or 30 or 40 items that were showing up for some reason, you can also click this count sheet. And then it'll have all of the items, and notice it has a barcode. So you can actually walk out there onto the shelf. For those of you that are using bin locations, which I'll talk a lot more about next time as part of the inventory counting piece, it'll put them in bin location order and tell you where that is. So you can walk out there, mark down what you actually physically counted, and then when you come back to update, you can just scan the barcode in Product Manager and then update the quantity. So that's step one. Okay, so now let's just click on going to Product Manager. So we know that we have two that we tried to sell, and so now we go here to details, and we tell it we want to add inventory. It's going to ask why, and I'm just going to, you can put whatever reason codes you want. I'm just going to put inventory. And now it tells us the quantity. So here's how this works, an important piece. So you go out there and you say, okay, I have two on the shelf currently. And you tried to sell two. Okay, so the holding tank has 2 of that item in it, and you have 2 on the shelf. That means for the sake of this, you have to put 4 into inventory. Okay, so whatever the total quantity was sold that's sitting in the holding tank, plus the quantity that you just counted that's actually on the shelf, you add those 2 together, and that's what you put into the holding tank. So we put in 4. And the cost on this item was $3.95. I looked at that before I clicked on this button. You could also go and look it up, from your wholesaler if you needed to, want to look on the last invoice or something like that. You could do that, but typically I recommend to people that you just use what your current cost is. That saves you time. So we'll click Add and OK here. Notice it cleared the holding tank and immediately went to 2. So all of that actually happens in the background, and if it is automated, and if we go back to the holding tank, you'll see that that item's now gone from the holding tank. So now the next item, we would do the same thing. We would then, this one though, is a 0 cost sale. So here, it's telling us to try to sell 1, and there's no cost. So now we can go to the product manager for this one, brings that up. And notice it shows that there's 3 on hand at 0. Okay, so what we can do here is we can come to the details, and in this case, we've got a bucket of 3 that doesn't have a cost associated with it. So we just come and put the cost in, and I'm going to pick the cost, the last cost here, the current cost of $612. So $612, and click OK. It'll ask for the reason again. Click OK. And now this item has updated, the cost is updated. And now in this particular case, with costs, it doesn't automatically clear. So we'll go back to the holding tank and we'll tell it to retry. And you'll see items tried 1, items processed 1. And now the holding tank's clear. So how often should you be doing the holding tank? Well, again, just like with basic inventory, I would say start with daily. That may not be realistic, so then start with weekly. But if your holding tank has hundreds of items in it after weekly, you may need to, again, consider doing a significant recount. Again, it's just going to be completely dependent on your site and and how many of these items are in there, because it's it's about good data versus bad data. If you have garbage data in your system, there's going to be a lot more work. And sometimes it just makes sense to we can clear the holding tank and then do a complete recount of the store or the sections that are on advanced inventory control. Again, that's just really dependent on your individual situation. Okay, so that really covers the tools and the difference between the two. I personally think that the advanced inventory control is the way to go. I love the holding tank because it catches those problems and lets you correct them before it does any damage to your reporting. So when it comes time to run your gross profit, return on investment, and your inventory turn reports, you absolutely get as good of information as possible. I'll open it up to questions. Thank you all for listening. And, if you're watching this, a recording of this and you end up with questions, just send them on to our support team and we'll get some assistance to you. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day.